In this lesson, we'll continue our review of Writing Test 10, Section 2. We are still on the third passage of marsupials and lend a hand to science. We're on question 30. Having 4 feet, quadrupedal marsupials in the study did not show a strong preference for the use of one forelimb. For instance, gray short-tailed opossums and sugar gliders were assigned a mean handedness very close to 0. They used their right and left forearms nearly equally. In effect, the study provided no evidence of handedness among quadrupedal marsupials. And so question 30, which choice provides the best transition from the previous paragraph? And before I scan up there, so this paragraph introduced the quadrupedal marsupials, and it said that they didn't have any preference for one hand or the other, but we just finished in the previous paragraph, and we even have this graph to refer it. It was about the bipedal marsupials. And they definitely did prefer one hand over the other. And we have this graph here to show that. And so this question 30, we want the best transition. So anytime, even though this question asked specifically for a topic sentence, which is the first sentence of a paragraph, you always want to make sure that there's a smooth transition. And the best transition from the previous one, well, intuitively, you can just think, well, it previously discussed the handiness preference for the bipedal marsupials, and now it's saying it's contrasting that with the quadrupedal marsupials where they don't have a preference. And so you look at A, having 4 feet, that doesn't make any transition. That just describes the quadrupedal marsupials. Like other mammals, again, there's no transition. In contrast to their bipedal counterparts, this is definitely the best choice because unlike the bipedal counterparts who do have a preference, these quadrupedal marsupials do not. So the answer is C. Kangaroos, though, still do not exhibit handiness to the extent that humans do. As the researchers noted, the quadrupeds typically live in trees and employ all 4 limbs in climbing. The bipeds, on the other hand, are far less arboreal, leaving their 4 limbs relatively free for tasks. I'll just read a little bit further. In whom handiness may confer an evolutionary advantage. So 31, again, read the call of the question. The main claim, kangaroos, though, still do not exhibit the handiness to the extent that humans do. So the main claim was about the bipedal marsupials and how they do prefer one hand to the other. We just finished that graph 2 paragraphs ago. So the main claim, kangaroos, though, do not exhibit the handiness, that really doesn't relate to the main claim. Let's look at the other choices. For the marsupials in the study, then, handedness seems to be associated with bipedalism. This looks good, doesn't it? Because we just contrasted in the previous paragraph with the quadrupedals, how they don't, but the bipedal marsupials definitely do, and that's what the main theme is if you go back to the beginning of the passage, even though they lack that corpus callosum. There are things scientists do not understand about the brain. Again, that's not the main theme. Additional studies on this phenomenon will need performed. This is, again, not the main theme. So the answer here is B. Just be careful. Evidence-based question. That's what the main claim is. And last couple of questions here. The bipeds, on the other hand, are far less arboreal, leaving their 4 limbs relatively free for tasks, in whom handiness may confer an evolutionary advantage. So this one, whom implies that the subject is a person, and if you ever have confused finding the subject, like if it's in whom or in which, just look right before the preposition. This is not about a person. This is about the tasks in which, because that's an inanimate object. So that's the relative pronoun here. It's which. Why the majority of marsupials studied preferred their left forelimbs, while the majority of humans prefer their right, remains a mystery. However, as does the mechanism by which, in the absence of a corpus callosum, the hemispheres of the marsupial brain communicate. So the last question for this passage, the writer wants to conclude the passage by recalling a topic from the first paragraph that requires additional research. Which choice best accomplishes it? So this final paragraph, remember, in the very beginning, I'll even show you. Let's go back to the very beginning of the passage. And it starts out right away that these marsupials, they lack a corpus callosum. And even though the bipedal marsupials do have a hand preference. So let's take a look at this last question again. The majority of humans prefer the right remains a mystery. However, as does the mechanism by which, in the absence of a corpus callosum, the hemisphere of the marsupial communicate. So this definitely was mentioned at the very beginning, right? The mechanism by which the absence of a corpus callosum, that's how the hemispheres of the brain communicate. Look, if you look at the choices here, the researchers should not neglect the sizable minority of humans who are left-handed. No, that's not relevant here. And scientists believe that the studies like this may someday yield insights into the causes of, again, there's no evidence, that was not mentioned at all. An additional study is planned to study handiness in other animals that stand upright only. None of these were mentioned. So it's definitely A for this one, because again, the writer wants to conclude this was a topic that was specifically mentioned, and that accomplishes that goal. So this one is no change.